do just as quickly as you can so that we can really focus most of our time on HR. So tell us a little bit about you and what you do for your living.
Cary, Arsaga. I have Arsaga's coffee shops and restaurants in Fayetteville, all of them in Fayetteville. We have a new restaurant we opened a couple of years ago, and I'm spending just about all my time there.
Opened in the middle of the pandemic.
Opening the pandemic. Trying to keep us staffed during the pandemic, trying to have enough money to pay them during the pandemic. So that's what I've been doing.
I'm his daughter, Ava Arsaga. I grew up in my family's business. They opened it in '92 when I was 7. And so I grew up in that family business, small business world, went away to college. I have a degree in a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry, which helps me in ways that I wouldn't have expected, actually. But now I help my family continue to run the business and expand and evolve and learn and grow.
I'm Lauren Blanco. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Markham and Fitz Chocolate. We're just right around the corner. We manufacture craft chocolate from scratch. We buy cocoa beans from all over the world and transform them into chocolate, treats, drinks, snacks. And so we have a brick and mortar like dessert bar and cafe, and we also distribute nationally. It's really good.
Really good.
Really good.
We use their chocolate at our coffee shop.
Delicious.
My name is Seggebruch. I'm the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Movista, a software company just 2 doors to the left. And also more local in Northwest Arkansas, part of a group of folks that have 5 restaurants here in Bentonville. Also opened one during the pandemic. That's fun. As well as have a small construction company.
Allyson Malone, HR by background, have helped a couple of these organizations in the past, and now I'm primarily focusing my time on executive leadership, workplace coaching. Great. Through the pandemic.
Always. We've earned that badge. It's like a star you get on your shoulder.
The survivor.
Yeah.
So I think that the first thing that we ought to talk about, and this is again going to be super interactive, but so you guys chime in anytime, but let's start about acquiring talent. Let's really talk about that. And we probably ought to spend quite a bit of time on it because of the issues that we've had, especially in Northwest Arkansas on that. Allyson, I'm just going to first look to you as from a 30,000 foot kind of standpoint. When somebody says to you, I need to hire my first employer, I've got to hire 5 more because the last 6 quit. What is your recommendation on how to get started on that?
Well, I guess my recommendation generally is trying to figure out what and who you're looking for. So it's very dependent upon your organization, the type of business you have. April could probably speak to this. Between the myriad of businesses that you own, your people you're looking for are going to probably be quite different, so that they would come from someplace different. But I guess step 1 is figuring out sort of what kind of a person are you looking for? What are some of those key characteristics that would make a successful employee? And one of the best ways to figure that out, if it's not the first time you've hired someone, is to look to the last person who was in that role. What made them valuable? What made them successful? And kind of thinking about some of those key traits, and then figuring out, where you would go get that person. And there are people way more expert that I see here, even in the audience, that could tell you where to go find them. But I think, at least figuring out step 1, what does this role look like? What are some of the key characteristics of a successful person? And I guess the last thing I would say is being clear about what your culture is and what some of the keys are to your particular organization.
Any other thoughts on that?
And from a small business cafe perspective, I think being prepared for questions that are asking for more transparency than we maybe would have expected in the past from employees interviewing, and thinking in terms a little bit more thinking from the perspective of the labor force that you're hiring, as opposed to being like, this is what I need as a company. Do you fit it? You're also asking, do we fit what you need? And being able to answer clear, for us, income is variable by tips, right? So we want to have data that says, this is what our people earn on average. This is what you're looking at. This is what we've done to guarantee that you'll earn a certain amount. And those come from the employee or the applicant or the current staff asking back to us. So being responsive both ways and anticipating maybe different than we would have, like before it would have been, oh, it's going to be a temporary job for somebody, but I think people are looking at their jobs differently. So we're preparing for that differently.
It's really true. When I first started, everybody that worked for us was a part-time worker. They were in college. It wasn't a career choice. But over the years, it took a while for us to make that adjustment. In fact, our kids kind of forced us into it. Like, oh, this is a real job. I mean, these are people who now, they're having kids. They have a mortgage to pay. They're being a lot more serious about the job. And we had to start thinking about how we approach in solving those problems for them.
Yeah, organizationally, the decisions we make affect all of those people, and there's an obligation to match what they would need. So maybe people didn't want the responsibility in the past, but now they want the responsibility and the compensation for it.
Do you guys feel like you are now? I feel like from all the clients that we work with, that we hear a lot about, we feel like now we're having to sell ourselves to potential people we hire, rather than it being, here is the job description, and here are the 27 responsibilities you're going to have, and here is the pay. That it is far more now. How can I be more attractive to you as an employer? How do you set yourself apart?
Well, first and foremost, that's 100% the reality. And we can not like it as employers, but unfortunately it's reality. So like we like to say, embrace the pain. It is an employee's market. And as we think through, and you say Northwest Arkansas, and it's painful here, but it's true almost every part of the country. Employees want to be part of something. Humans want to be part of something today more than ever before, and they spend the majority of their waking time at their job. So they have a greater and greater desire to be part of something within their employment, and we have to cater to that as employers. Well, we don't have to, but it seems to be those that do are a little bit more successful in, hiring and retaining the talent. So first and foremost, similar to Arsaga, like being able to articulate what it means to be an employee at your company is like step one. It's like the first thing. It's like the phases, the filters, the lenses that they go through. Like that's first and foremost, being able to spark something within that person that they want to be a part of what you're doing. And then yes, the things that come after that are the articulation of the expectations of the role. But just like Mary Beth said, 100%, we have to hook them. In the current day and age, we have to hook these potential recruits. And the best way to do that typically is money or emotions. And you got an endless budget, you can go to money first, but not many of us operate in that environment. So a lot of times you got to go to the emotional side and, paint that picture of what they can be a part of.
Yeah, there's the apocryphal story of like two people digging a ditch, and one is approached to be like, well, what are you doing? He's like, well, obviously I'm digging a ditch. Like that's what I'm not happy about it. And the next person looks a lot, just carries himself or herself differently and asks, what are you doing? Oh, we're building a cathedral. Like I'm part of this process, and obviously no one person's responsible for it, but they want to feel like when you feel like you're digging a ditch to build a cathedral, then it's way different than like I'm stuck digging this ditch and I would rather be somewhere else,
Yeah, and along those lines, like authenticity is like huge right now, absolutely huge. So it doesn't matter if you're in the software deal and you're paying high tech wages, you're in the restaurant space, and you're dealing with servers or cooks or whoever, or the construction that's working in 110 degrees weather right now, sweating their butts off 10, 12 hours a day. They want to be, spoken to as an equal, and the authentic nature of being able to communicate your message is really, really big. And it does seem like more now than ever, it's not just a paycheck. Like they want to understand the bigger picture.
I think it's good too, because it forces us to think about it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it improves us, even if it feels like, oh my God, like sometimes like it feels absurd even, but I'm like, oh, wait a second, actually we're improving because of this too.
I was talking to an applicant the other day, and I was saying, you know, we're a family business, and I was taking it to mean a positive thing, you know, and he said, well, that's not such a plus anymore.
Mhm.
And I went, why not? Just because I understand you can be asked a lot more of you from a family business than if it was just a job. And I went, yeah, well, I don't know what to say about that. Because we are a family.
On that line though, being authentic, I cannot tell you how many times, how many times, multiple times, I'm in the middle of, top thing I'll ask at the end, towards the end of every interview, like, how do I say this the right way? We're not right for every potential employee.
Right.
And that's okay. And not every candidate is right for us. And that's okay.
Yeah.
We actually work really hard to find the mismatches before we hire them. Hire them. Because you don't want to have to fire them. And you don't want them to leave. Because to your point, they're going to figure it out eventually.
Yeah.
They're going to figure out, if you're going to be authentic, they're going to figure out what you are and what Arsaga stands for eventually. Who wants to, you know, spin the cycles and spend the time or the money or whatever, however you want to quantify it. So we actually seek to find the mismatches. And even though they maybe have all the skills on their resume, if they don't match our culture, like you said, Allyson, we'd rather not hire them.
I would argue that every company is not for every person. Like what April said, I think applies to every business out there. Not every person's for every job, and not every company or organization's for every person. I think it's huge. Couldn't agree more.
I own it proud. Yeah, we're a family owned, fantastic coffee shop. And we're not right for everybody, but find those right ones and they'll stick around. And
yeah, I think to that point, like saying it's an employee market, it's definitely an employee market, but there's so much of that back and forth, like trying to find that right fit and finding the mismatches. And like, I think it's taken us, or it's taken me, a really long time to figure out like what it is we really need for each position. And that evolves over time as we talk with those employees and kind of work with them to figure out like, what makes this job valuable to you? Because we have lots of constraints to make it valuable, you know? And so it's been a work in progress, you know, and it's never complete to figure out like what it is that makes this valuable.
So how do you guys find the people to interview in the first place? I mean, what is the key on, is it some crazy cool job, you know, or job description, or how is it you're actually finding the people to even get to have a conversation?
I can speak to like a lot of us, like we promote from within. So we're hiring constantly, and that's kind of the structure of a restaurant. There's a lot of turnover, but then we don't usually hire a manager from a management suite of people. We promote from within, and they know our business and they work their way up. So we're looking, it's kind of focuses the laser a little bit because we have a smaller pool to look at our current team who's got the skills that we want to promote. And one other thing is changing our mentality from saying, this is the job and you have to do it whether you want it or not, versus like, what do you find exciting and that you feel you could really be good at? And what if we made positions that kind of shaved off what you hate, and somebody else might love that? And it turns out like there's usually somebody who wants to do everything. So rather than being like, I'm sorry, it's the world, you gotta do this, it's like, what if we took it to say, what are you really good at and excited about? Let's put you in those positions. That's how we got Kate, our current, she's an assistant operations director, and she's fantastic. And she hated managing the cafe and she would have quit. But we were like, what do you like the best? And so we promoted her into that position.
So at Arsaga, how do you find the entry level people then to kind of fill the filter at the bottom to then promote up?
Well, we're lucky. You know, we've been in business for 30 years. So you know, some of the people we're hiring are the kids of the people who used to work there.
Yeah, right.
And we just don't have
our website.
What's that?
We have a website.
We have a website. People apply online. People bring in their applications, and it's kind of a cool place to be. It's a lot of people. I mean, we've hired a lot of people in Fayetteville. It was their first jobs, and I think we're kind of noted for that, you know, which is good and bad because they come up with certain expectations, and you kind of bust their bubble.
You're growing them up, rather.
Yeah, you kind of teach them. This is what it's like to have a job.
Are you finding it to your customers too?
A lot of times customers, it's a university town, a lot of students, but word of mouth, friends of employees. And I mean, we have a website. I mean, a lot of applicants that come in from out of town are searching We're not posting on hiring services, really. We're just putting it out there that we're hiring and people apply.
Oh, nice. We're kind of the opposite. We have to post to find people. We don't have really enough staff to like promote with it. I mean, we do that occasionally and that's great. And we've seen that with some of our staff now, but for the most part, if we have turnover, I'm usually just posting on Indeed for some of our kind of entry level positions. And more recently I've had some job postings that were like, I needed higher quality or more experienced applicants. And so I used LinkedIn and I paid this time because the last time I didn't pay, I only got like one applicant. So paying really helps me in this latest season of hiring. Yeah.
Can I ask real quick the businesses that everyone's in?
Yeah.
Like take 30 seconds to go around real quick.
Start with me. I'm in event production.
Production. Okay.
About 3 and
Okay.
We work with Avoidance. We're a human resources consulting.
Something okay.
Recruiting to employee benefits to outsourcing HR payroll systems.
So just started, kind of put my toe in this whole, started a new business, but it's in the water restoration, mobile remediation.
Very cool. Okay. Let me guess.
Go ahead, try.
What do you think?
Shoot.
Service industry. Restoration.
Right on. Water, smoke,
In-house
fire,
water.
foam, biohazard, all of the nasty jobs that nobody wants to do. That's what it is.
Beth and I are in recruiting and human resources as well. So
Gotcha.
we're really interested in everything you're sharing as far as what the hot buttons are.
Cool. Super helpful to give some context.
Yeah.
Referrals is out of everything you guys said. The one other thing is we've implemented referral programs at almost every business, and that's worked out really well. So, you don't want to, if you really take that much from your job and you really want to enjoy it, you usually don't recommend in rotten eggs. So
That's our number one source of funding.
Well, and it makes it like a cohesive too. Whenever people join it, there's not that same like rocky new school feeling as much.
we used to write last thing, like go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, you guys kind of talked about, the interview process. Typically, how many interviews do you do before you select the right person? And what does that look like for each of you? I'm just curious.
Well, I'll go first. We usually, again, we're hiring for these like entry-level positions. So I typically will recommend the manager's interview of 3 strong applicants. And then they recommend 2 for a second interview. And it's more just like so that I can have a conversation with the manager about what their impressions were. And I have follow-up questions. And then we pick the one that we're most excited about. And then we treat the first 1 to 3 months as an extended interview where the employee can decide like, I don't fit in here at all, I'm out. Or we can be like, turns out this is not a great fit either, like, and without a whole lot of to do, we just be sorry, this isn't working.
It's not working.
Yeah, and we tell them ahead of time, like that's
Yeah,
what's happening.
You can quit on a dime, we can get rid of you on a dime.
And usually what we'll do is we'll reposition people. Like it'll be like, oh, we thought you would be a good barista. Maybe you'd be a better server support or host or warehouse assistant because you're not great with people or something like that. So that's our process.
Ooh, I don't know. We probably lack a lot of systems when it comes to HR. It's really just me mostly. And then my cafe manager probably does the rest of the hiring. So it's very like kind of hodgepodge. I'd say, we'd probably max interview 3 people and then narrow it down from there. Yeah, I don't know that I have much more to add to that. Very. we also like, I was thinking about time and like how much time it takes to hire people. And I feel like I'm always pressed for time. Like I don't have time to spend with a lot more people. And so that's what I've been trying to like teach myself this time around. Is like, how do I kind of figure out the best candidates before I bring them in for an interview or like take them further down the process? to help save some of that time, and hopefully
Yeah.
it works out.
Like, to that point, I feel like sometimes our managers are like, quick, warm body.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I know you're gonna be stuck with that warm body for maybe a long time. So
Yeah.
take your time, even though it seems like you want to rush it. Like
Right.
we started to have some redundancies, and like we have people who can fill in whenever we've lost a person. So it's not so immediate because, and we also tell our managers after the person passes their 1 to 3 month trial period, it's kind of like you're married. And if you want to fire them for something like not being able to do their job, there has to be therapy. Like you can't just divorce. Like you have to try. And so make that decision early, like fire fast if it's not going to work. But once you've made it to this point, like if somebody does something like, I don't know, sexual harassment or stealing in a way that like terrible stealing. Like sometimes we're like, what's going on with you? So why did you feel like you had to steal? Do you need help? But let's say it's just like.
So sweet.
April would say,
When we
No wonder you don't have problems hiring people.
Keep it minimal.
single digits.
when we first opened, we had a reputation. We never fired anybody,
Yeah.
which was pretty much true. We just didn't.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the reason. Oh, they were stealing. That's what it was. And we fired somebody, and all the other small business people in the neighborhood came over and said, "Congratulations,
You
you finally
fired
done the words out. You will fire somebody."
Well, but we have a lot of like also probably conflict avoidant tendencies, and our managers don't want to follow up and tell people what they're doing wrong. They're like, this person's just, they should know better. And you're like, well, they don't. You know, they don't know that being late every day is a problem until you tell them, apparently. So you need to tell them and say, if you keep doing this, you'll be fired. So that there's a chance that somebody, and I think that we then grow people because of that. They feel respected, and through not like just avoidant and then cutting off, that hurts, you know, when somebody's like, I didn't even know. You're like, well, you should have. Like that was the conversation we were having with managers and staff after somebody was being fired. So we're trying to, like, nobody should be surprised to be fired is our motto, except for in the first 1 to 3 months. They might be surprised at that.
Question for those that are on the small business administration type kind of side. I'm not very familiar with this in Arkansas. We don't do a lot of lower level recruiting, but the Workforce Investment Board in Arkansas, does it include or does it sponsor the work readiness certification process?
We get a tiny bit of funding from the SBA, but we are not with the SBA. We're
Okay.
University of Arkansas, so I'm sorry.
But to help with small businesses and stuff, you may be more familiar with it than I am. So in many states, the Workforce Investment Board has a workforce certification class that those that have been unemployed can go through, and it will do. You'll get basically they get like a little card that says, "I passed, and I'm a level 4 or a level 3 or something like that." They have tests for reading for locating information, simple mathematics, reading for understanding information, things like that. And it also combines some of the WOTC, the Workforce Opportunity Tax Credit funding that the Workforce Investment Board gets. The Workforce Opportunity Tax Credit is a tax credit that you get for hiring a former military member.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are sometimes, especially for the lower level positions, those are good resources to look at, the Workforce Investment Board and the Workforce Readiness Certification, because they can actually produce people for you that could be eligible for the Workforce Opportunity Tax Credit. They get you more money, offsets your payroll taxes. You get some free money from the government. That's nice. But it also has that certification. So when you're screening people, you already know up front, I've got somebody that is good at details, good at math, good at reading and understanding information, or those types of things. That might be, and they'll also post jobs for you for free, oftentimes.
I've lived in Northwest Arkansas a long time, run a business for a long time, and been here and truly have heard nothing about it in Northwest Arkansas.
Okay.
So, I mean,
It may be a
nor
little
the
bit different
access.
in Arkansas than
Yeah,
other states,
right.
but typically that's what the state's Workforce
Well,
Investment Board will
We have
sponsor.
far more involvement in Northwest Arkansas on workforce development than we do in other parts of this. I mean, a lot of parts of the state. Northwest Arkansas Council has a big, a whole arm of their program that really focuses on workforce development. But I don't know about any kind of programs you all that are able to provide, like, I was a banker for 30 years. So you can imagine the incoming influx of tellers and such, but we never had access to that kind of information.
Those programs are nice because they kind of give you a funnel or
We'll
a
research that.
pipeline of candidates that
Yeah.
that are kind of pre-certified for you.
I guess Serve Safe is sort of a small, for food service industry, people who've gotten this certification that shows they have a certain level of understanding of
Well, look at that. Yeah.
food safety. Yeah.
Well,
I'm gonna give you one
please
more,
add to that.
just
Yeah,
feedback for
what-
you,
yes.
around the process we go through. First and foremost, we hire for 3 main areas: cultural fit, team fit, and skill, competency. And I'm actually gonna juxtapose on the software deal, how we did it when we were more, your stage starting up versus how we do it today. The process, the steps were very similar. They were done in different orders though, because of the size of, and the resources that we had access to. In the old days, the very first thing we would do is, after we had a candidate that was interested in resume passed, is I would interview them, because I wanted to find out right away if they were a good cultural fit. I was never a software engineer, a developer, coder. I was never going to be able to tell if they had the skill or not. And I wasn't going to really be able to tell if they were going to be a great team fit because they hadn't talked to their teammates yet, but I didn't want to waste anyone's time. So I very quickly did a 30, 45-minute interview to just get a sense if they were a good cultural fit. Very, very, this is who we are, out on the table, authentic as you could be, and just get them not to want to come back, or get us to say, that's just not gonna work. So then we would go to skill, and we would give them a little code challenge, if you will. And everyone's skill is different, from a barista to, operating machinery or whatever. But we went to skill next, because I didn't want to waste any team members' time unless they knew how to do the job. So then we eventually, if they did a good job on the skill, they passed the code challenge, then we would have them spend time with different team members and see what the fit was like. But again, our 3 primary things was cultural fit, team fit, competency. Now we do it the complete opposite. I don't have any time, so I'm the last person they talk to, and I try to get them not to want to take the job. If they don't opt out after they spend 30 minutes together, then they're probably a decent cultural fit. And of course, the teams through the stages now are interviewing for cultural fit as well.
Yeah.
So there's I've only ever gotten one person not to come back, and I've only vetoed one person. In all the hiring that we do, that's it, 1 and 1. One person literally said, "This is it for me." And I was like, high five. I commend that. I'm literally thank you. But how we start now is we start for skill first. And so all of that, and again, it's a reverse of and then go to team, and then to me. So I would just tell you to figure out what's most important to you, what you're hiring for, and then prioritize your time and the time of your team members to check those boxes. Totally align, and every single business is the same, having multiple people interview them, whether it's a manager, a peer, different department, if that makes sense. Because again, the sanctity of your team and protecting that's a really big deal, because you don't want to get a bad egg, rotten apple, and sour the whole thing, because it's hard. You want to retain the ones you got. So
one of the things that Lauren brought up was how much time is involved in all this. So in my head, one thing I think would be important to discuss is how do we avoid that time? And to me, one of those things is to avoid people leaving and turning around and hire again, because it is far more expensive to hire a new person than it is to retain the people that you have. So tell me about your onboarding process. I feel like an onboarding process is really important for people to both have a clear set of expectations. Here's what's expected of me, but to kind of run through with me, do you all have a kind of a standard ongoing process for onboarding, or is it a little bit hit and miss, or what do you feel like you could do better? Any kind of hints for these folks on that?
it's almost unfair. The software company's unfair, for me to use that, because it just has the resources. They're just we have a very structured onboarding process, and it's pretty cool. It's you get some of these things are consistent across everything. You get a welcome packet. So like your first day, you have a box that says, we're happy you're here. Maybe you get some pens, some chocolate. And the construction deal, you get a yellow shirts because you have to wear them. So whatever is appropriate, like you get something that says, hey, welcome to the family. Then at the software deal, like we go through a 3-day, 4-day immersion process. I think you might have come up with the original years ago. It may have been it.
I did too.
I think you did it years ago. It's definitely, it was never better than the day, never better than the day. Never better. But they spend time with every department because again, it's a little larger company. So sales, marketing, customer success. They spend like a 2-hour session and then they get a product demo and then they go do store walks. They get immersed in the business. So they're best, we spend a week on it. So it's like, yeah, those are payroll dollars, but they're better positioned to do their job once they come out of immersion week, if you will. And then also they do feel more connected because this goes back to your question. They feel more connected with their teammates. Again, it's a much larger company. So, but we do something similar for the restaurants and something similar for the construction, but it's not as elaborate, but it's super powerful. It not only gets them from day one to productive faster, but it also, to your point, to your question, Mary Beth, it binds them to the rest of the company and to what we're doing because knowledge is power, and they have more knowledge about what we're doing. So thank you, Allyson.
Well, and my thinking on that is just like these things can evolve. Like whatever I created, I don't know,
It's
3 or
never
so
been better.
years
It's
ago
never been better than when you put it.
is, you know, it's a bigger organization. It's probably more complex. So it can evolve from whatever it was before that, which was just we have no time and no one to even think through an onboarding. So we're throwing people in all the way to wherever it is today. So, and I just think anything you can do to make people feel
Connection.
connected.
I like that a lot. Even in our, I mean, like I took a note to be like immersion week.
Yeah. They love it. They absolutely love it. They're like, and then you should come into the kitchen the next week, like day 2, and they got all these friends. Yes. I was like, how do you know all these people? I don't even know all these people.
Yeah.
Because they spend the time.
Yeah.
They absolutely love it.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
Well, a lot of times people are just thrown in
Yeah.
for us. But we, you know, I think one of the most important parts for us, for any team member, is to get a clear like understanding and education of like the chocolate making process, whether you're actually making chocolate or whether you're selling chocolate. Everyone needs to know what the process is. And so for us, that's like kind of what our onboarding is centered around. But it's definitely like when we can fit it in, there's no like, I mean, there's maybe a first day and a half, but it's more like a day and a half for us instead of a week.
Yeah, I forgot to mention to your point, they do Stan does it monthly now. So Stan's the CEO and other co-founder. He does it monthly now because it's just, otherwise you're just doing it all the time. Mm-hmm. He does 45 minutes on the company. Mm-hmm. To your point, like how to make history, like who we are, what we stand for, what our values are. To your point, like the coolness and the chocolate making deal. It's important to them. And they want to hear it from the people that started it, yourself and, you know, staying on our side. So that's a big part of it too. Very entertaining.
How does your onboarding process look?
And so it's pre-pandemic and post-pandemic is different. And we had a much more involved pre-pandemic one, but when the pandemic hit, we were like down to the basics. We can't really give everybody the same in-depth training. And now I think we're starting to couple together what would be, you know, the 3.0 that takes what we liked from the beginning. Because earlier we had a lot of backloading of training on just like everything possible. Like if we say it once, they'll know it all. Like doesn't work. So, but we did tell everybody like we had these a suite of classes that they went through. Baristas had checkpoints along the way, and then they would get into the shops like really like their lobes bursting with new information that they couldn't use yet because they hadn't actually done any of it. And now we're more like, let's get you in the shop. Let's get you situated. You're going to be learning physical, like actual hands-on. You have attention being given to you, but then later we come back and give them more information and sort of flesh out what they're doing. And I feel like that's been way better for everybody. They're actually able to retain what we tell them, and it gives a sense of growth, a sense of like development, that they're learning more. And so we also used to have like you come to the roastery, you sit, I gave the talk to every single employee that we hired about who we were, and this is everybody who's here, and this are our policies, this is why we want you to have open communication. If you have problems, come talk to us. But like, that wasn't going to actually work either, because I was like, I can't keep doing this. Like, I did it for 2 years, and I was like, you know what, this isn't working. Actually, I think it's maybe not even working in the way that we hope it would. But I think bringing people and letting the team kind of like imbue them with company culture by like their peers actually telling them what it's like to work there, as opposed to me being like, this is a good place to work. We're very honest people. Take it from me. Like, what does that mean? So having them, you know, if your team is actually happy to be there and you plug people in, then that's just gonna like, it's like having your second kid who learns from the first kid what the family's like, you know? Like, I don't know. I think it's better. So I like that immersion idea a lot. And I think our weakness is that we have so many different locations and places, and some people are like, well, I just work in the kitchen and I don't know who anybody even is. Some people walk through here, I think they're allowed to be here. I don't know. Like, so not being able to feel plugged into the organism as a whole, or like the central nerve. So I'm thinking now that it would be a good idea to have some kind of like traveling little like orientation.
Something we've been working on is like trying to identify what pieces we need to continue training, because like you said, like if they're told once, like oftentimes, especially if it's like a skill that they have to develop, like it has to be practiced over and over again. And so we've run into issues that we've had to address with staff, like we need more training.
Yeah.
You know, like we need to readdress some of these skills, or, you know, whatever it is, more frequently. And so that's something that we're like kind of constantly building on.
Yeah. And like not even expecting your staff to be perfect. Like be like, expect you're going to be engaged, and like it's good. Like make some mistakes, and then we'll figure out.
The mistake kind of illuminates what's missing or lacking.
As opposed to like, oh, you made a mistake, you're fired. We told you this once 3 months ago.
Right. Yeah.
And it keeps it more like open.
One of you guys brought up conflict, that you were kind of conflict avoidance type. I think what do you feel like, how do you approach conflict within your group? I mean, in general, but also, I mean, one of my biggest problems years ago was, you know, if it's same level folks and they just cannot seem to get along, then how are you? I mean, I will tell you, I'll be honest, I was known then to be the person who just says, okay, if you say this, she said, get everybody in the same room and we're going to hash this out. Because stories typically change once you're all in the same room. And there's truth is somewhere in the middle. How do you guys seem to resolve those kind of conflicts? Or do you avoid it like the plague and then it eventually becomes a cancer?
I think it's true, like in relationships, if you go to therapy, like what you would say to each other or to other people about each other is different when you have a professional in the room with you being like, really? That's or you start to be a little bit more on higher behavior, like higher level thinking and empathy because somebody's watching. So I can think of some conflicts we've had where we have brought everybody together, especially like harassment-y things, where we've been like asked people to have conversations around what happened, and we have them individually with people. We won't put people in situations that are going to make them incredibly uncomfortable. It depends on the severity of the situation, but disagreements, we've had people come and talk through them, and I feel like that has helped.
That's also I mean, what I'm learning is there's generation. There'd be people who say a joke, I think it's funny, and somebody else is incredibly offended by it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to be more sensitive to that now. Okay, I get it. That's no longer appropriate. But we've had to let people go because
to set a tone. Like sometimes it's important to be clear with what our standards are. We did have this training with our managers pre-pandemic about sort of how do you think of like whenever somebody's hurt by something and you don't even see it, like what do you do with that? Because you might be like, well, you're really. And you're like, no, you just don't see it. You don't see what they're going through. You don't feel it yet. And maybe if you have that impulse, or you think you're being wrongly accused of something, of an offense that you think should be not an offense, we train our managers to be like, take a second, don't say you must be crazy to, just be like, ooh, this is one of those. I don't know. I don't get it yet. And I am actually interested in figuring out why you're upset, because I would rather figure that out and grow my understanding of the situation. So we had an employee who had said something offensive to another who he just didn't see it. And it took like kind of a long time of talking with him to be like, do you realize that when you say this, it means something different to that person than what it would mean if they were saying it to you? Like, it's not equal, and you're their boss. So on top of all of that, you've got to expand what you understand here and not have a knee-jerk reaction. So that's been, and I feel like every time we go through those, we use them in training later and like to say like, look, because somebody might even empathize with the person who learns something, who does learn something in that scenario. And we use it to say like, yeah, like, look at this. We can even get all the way over here to the other person's perspective if you just slow down and think about it, like what their world might be like. So that's been true.
Yeah, it's not.
I'm the
easy.
worst. I don't think I should answer this one.
Well, I know you'll be on one complete side. So tell us what
I just don't, it's just not my thing. Like,
Yeah.
you do amazing. Like, it's just not my thing. Like, we are really lucky at the software deal. Stan, our CEO and co-founder, is a big personality. Fair? Very big personality. And he's also our chief cultural officer. Like, he is huge on culture, and he lives it every day. He reiterates it every day, and he's fantastic. Plays a fantastic role in that bit. One of our 6 key cultural values is get along or get along. Like, get along or just get along. No one has time for any of this. So like, a lot of we have this. That's why I say we're lucky. We do have an environment at Movista that is very much folks get along, or they just sort it out themselves. There's just not a lot of conflict we have to deal with over there. And also, as we've grown, you have to allow folks to, you don't want to, come in from the top and try to referee and with respect. Totally understand where you're going. So we're fortunate over there. There's lots of conflict in the restaurant that I can't deal with it.
Yeah.
So that's why I say I'm not best for this one. I just cannot personally deal with it.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot.
I delegate that so much.
It's like a crazy system that has a lot of historic. Like, it's just imbued with a lot of unhealthy tendencies, and so kitchen culture, like
Just
service
shove,
culture,
yell,
like
that's what I say. The
throwing
culture,
pan,
the environment's
for
totally
what they see
different.
on TV,
Right.
yeah, you're like, what? So yeah,
I don't have a good one on that one, Mary Beth. I must get a pass. Like, we get one pass.
I will say,
if you were to speak to people I used to work with, they would all say we had the exact same get along or get
Just
along.
get along. Yeah.
I like that though.
Yeah. And that's why I don't know if that would work in every industry with every
Right.
business. I don't. It
Doesn't
won't
work
work
in
in the
truth.
construction industry. Like,
can't get along.
it's a madhouse the way they treat each other and interact and the things that are said on job sites.
Yeah.
Right.
You're offended every 35 seconds.
Yeah.
Right.
So you have to have a different, with this topic specifically, I think it's very industry specific. And I'm a terrible one to deal with. So. Anything else to add to that?
Oh, well, I certainly don't like conflict, and I'm really glad that I have a manager to run the cafe and handle most of the conflict, at least directly. But when it escalates, that's usually when I get involved and try and, I don't know, just kind of mediate. Probably no systems. I think what we've learned is that like we have not had very like clear expectations for our staff. Like, these are our policies. So year after year, we're just like slowly adding, okay, this is a policy now because that happened, and so I think that that's helped us clarify and like create steps in the process for like, okay, this is how we handle, sexual harassment or whatever, and usually try and mediate in a way, kind of like you were explaining. But it really depends, and probably the most conflict is always like service in the service part of the business. There's always conflict elsewhere, but that's usually a little bit more long and drag out. Because maybe we think we can get around it somehow, or I probably avoid conflict to some degree, and have been trying to figure out how to maybe be more proactive in setting. It really like comes down to expectations and communicating them clearly and knowing what your boundaries are. At least for me, that's like been a big one.
Construction, the foreman said something that offended the sensibilities of a minority one night after, they closed down the job site, finally got back to me. I called the guy that runs all the field, like, hey, we gotta deal with this. This isn't like, it's like, all right, what are we gonna do? We hash out a plan and we're about to like go talk to people. About a couple hours before we go talk to people, we found out that it was all settled and we just needed to let everyone take care of it themselves out in the field. Apparently when the foreman walked out of the hotel room the next morning, the guy was standing outside, popped him good square in the face, knocked him on his back. Everyone was good. I'm just like, it's a true story. Like they both work together. He still works for the foreman, and that's just their industry. So that was completely foreign to me before I had that experience. So I just it's a really great topic.
Another form of it besides like mediating between employees was with our managers and conflict avoidance with correction. And I feel like that was a learning curve for us as a company. Like we never fired anybody. And one thing that I felt like helped me a lot was in addressing a problem with another employee or with somebody who is below you or whatever, like that if you come to a super nervous and super just flittery, like just be direct, like being direct and being clear, like having clear expectations. It's not a huge deal if somebody made a mistake. You're like, you made a mistake, I make mistakes all the time. So we're just talking about the one you made. And if you keep making that mistake, you can't, because then you can't work here anymore. And it's not personal. It's like just clearly giving feedback and accepting it both ways. Like if there's something I'm doing that's going to result in you quitting, I want you to tell me, and I'm going to try to take it like for the information that it is. And it doesn't have to be, it keeps things from heating up quite as much. It's, obviously in a perfect world, that's how it would go. But expecting that and not coming into it with a lot of like taking everything personally, like, I can't believe you, whatever. Just be like, no, this is the exact action that was not going to work. I'm telling you clearly, I still like you as a person. Like, this is fine. And do you understand? And
definitely operated different. I was into the drama.
yeah, he was really into the drama.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Like charisma. I think that we have to operate differently though, because people will trust your charisma, where they'll be like, they won't take it from me.
Well, I remember, Ava definitely changed our, I don't want to say company culture, but we got to it was always a mom and pop operation when my wife ran. That's the way it was. And all of a sudden we turned around and we had 100 employees, and you can't be doing these things like this anymore. And it's true, we couldn't. We wouldn't have survived if you wouldn't have come back in and start making systems. We didn't have, the system was whatever we made up that day, Well, it was, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And we got this big, leave me alone, I can do this. Yeah. Until I couldn't anymore, And so it wasn't, and that's why, you're talking about, we don't have that many systems. Well, you're in the beginning of it. So it makes sense, it works. That's where you are now.
Right.
But then, you grow, your kids come back, it works for you. They make it better.
Is this number one?
It's number one.
Got a little bit of a ways. But
It happens quicker than you think.
Start training right away.
It does.
Allyson, I want your take on communications, because every poll always states that a really high percentage is something like an 85% of people leave in their first year because they feel like there's been a lack of communication. Any insight for small businesses on how to?
My memory on that had been over the course of a couple larger organizations I worked for. They did, we would do a culture survey or whatever it was called. And the results seemed to be the same no matter what company's data I was looking at. It was really interesting. And communication would always be a high issue. It was low, poor, low ranked. So it's got to be a widespread issue. And I think it's just easier said than done, and I think there's the conflict piece of it, but I don't even remember your exact question on communication, like how to do it, have it.
Well, we think of even in this room, some really small businesses as well as it continues to grow, and how to continue to remind people of the company culture. How do we remind people of even changes in policies and any of those kind of things? And I in my former life, I would get tired of just receiving an email. This is the new change. This is the new change. Because by paragraph number 2, didn't read it.
Yeah.
I was thinking that's it. It's got to be a variety of communication vehicles. The olden days, it was an email, and that nobody's going to read an email, period. So I think it depends upon, your organization. When I remember early on, I worked for Rockfish way when it was small. We were like 30 some odd people. And my office happened to be outside of the CEO's office. And I literally overheard everything I needed to know. I was like, well, this is handy. I don't ever have to go bug him. I know it. And then we got bigger and we split into multiple offices. And all of a sudden I was like, dang, I don't know as much as I used to. And it was just bizarre. I went, boy, I really did. It was kind of that water cooler. I really kind of overheard what it was I needed to know. And I think it's the same in any of these small businesses. You grow into multiple locations. I think you were talking about that, it's hard to see everything. So I think you've got to think about what needs to be communicated and what the right vehicle is. And sometimes it's a text. It's 99 times out of 100, not an email. Sometimes it's an all hands. Sometimes it's the founder of the company. Sometimes it can't be because, so I think you've got to think about what your constraints are and think about what your people pay attention to. And if it's a text, I don't know, text them. If it's Slack is your main communication vehicle, Slack them.
There are landmines out there texting. And I've walked into every one of them unknowing. I mean, I'm a in-person, I like talking to you. I don't like texting. I didn't even look at text a lot of time. I definitely don't look at emails. But I can remember one time I was texting somebody and I came in and they asked me why I was upset with them. I'm not upset with you at all. Why would you say that? And they said, well, the way you texted me, I can promise you I did not say anything inappropriate or anything. And she took it out. She said, look, and I said, she says, this is right here. I said, that says thank you. She says, yeah, I'm serious.
No exclamation.
There's no exclamation point. I had no idea.
My kid.
Yeah. And she says, well, that's sarcastic. I went, wow, thank you is now sarcastic unless you put it in. And I finally got it. I mean, it took me, I thought that was the most absurd thing I heard. That's why I said it's a landmine. You don't know. And then I'm told, well, that's why I need to use emojis. That can be dangerous too. So anyway, good luck.
It's not practical to have an in-person conversation over and over.
What we've done at our company lately is sort of like deputize people to be the new, like what we once could oversee. Now we have like schismed in a way into several fiefdoms. And so we have somebody who's over each one, and I talk to all of those people and I make sure they know what's going on. Like we're just changing our tip split, like how we handle people's money, big hot issue, and we're changing it at our restaurant. And so we had a meeting with all of our managers that are there. There's a manager for each department. And we're telling our employees to come to you with questions. So you need to make sure that you ask all the questions right now that you think of, like preemptively, like what you might think they would wonder about. Let's talk through it. We spent 2 hours going over it, but now they're all like able to go. And I'm like, if you get a question you can't answer, then come to me. And it's sort of like a cascading, just sort of order chain of command type of thing, where now instead of us telling every employee, we've like, you're in charge of year 20, you're in charge of year 20, and they can have actual real conversations that are human and like intuitive. But if they hit a roadblock that they can't figure out, they then come to us and we step in. So it just like, the less generous way of thinking of it whenever I was like, we're throwing bodies in front of ourselves, lots of bodies, like other people that are going to be filtering first, and then we get the real big problems, but they can handle a small amount of smaller problems, like a filter, human filter.
Okay, one thing I'm noticing it's now 1 o'clock, so I don't want to take up too much of everybody's time. Can we have a few, many more questions from this group though? And then if anybody can stick around to answer any of them.
I do have one. What's one thing you wish you would have known early on as it relates to the HR, since this is an HR panel? I mean, what's one thing you're like, oh, I should have known that starting out? Just curious.
I'll pick one.
Top three.
I've never been onboarded by any other companies. So like when it comes to systems and procedures and all that kind of stuff, I feel like everything is on my list because I've had to just like teach myself from scratch, and which, you know, it would have helped had I had some training. But I think the biggest one for me is like how to know what you need. And how, like, in terms of expectations, and how to just set expectations from the start. Because I spent a lot of time, like, bending over backwards to make sure people were, you know, just like taking care of, thinking that everything was my responsibility instead of just letting people do.
Yeah,
your
sometimes
jobs.
they can do a better job if you're not inserting yourself into their world,
Yeah,
just giving them their instructions and trusting them enough to do it.
Right, yeah.
Folks are motivated differently. Some people just don't care about equity, stock options at all. So more tuned into comp packages.
One of the things I can say is that just because somebody's good at their current job and they're exceptional does not mean that that person is a great man, will be a great manager.
Oh, right, yeah.
That is one
Different
really
skill sets.
hard lesson early on.
Yeah.
Was just because they're so great that so many have a struggle with moving up from being a peer to being a supervisor.
Yeah.
And then blurring those lines is really difficult for some.
That's one of the big problems we have had in terms of actually
Promoting
from within, because then you're promoting
to their level of incompetence. Is that
right. And that's hard because especially when you're dealing with younger people, which we mainly deal with, you know, it's hard for them to be a boss to their friends, you know. In fact, I just hired somebody to be the front of the house manager. That was outside the company.
Yeah, that's
but she worked for us for 10 years, 10 years ago. So it's not like she was outside the company. She's just been away for 10 years. But she's coming in, I want to say as an adult, but she's coming in as an adult because she's in her 40s and she's going to be managing 20-year-olds, and the 20-year-olds have a harder time managing 20-year-olds. And there are the rare ones that can do it, and you'll find them because they don't mind telling people what to do. They'll tell me what to do. And I'm like, okay, you're hired. Tell me what to do. I know you're not afraid, So
I wish I had known that that more information doesn't often mean more comprehension of the situation. Like that in dealing, especially with employees and money, I was like, okay, full transparency. We're just going to tell you everything. We're going to tell you what we're doing and how we're doing it. And it just confused the hell out of everybody. And they were like, mad still. And I'm like, well, over what? They're like, we don't even know. So like simplifying information to make it easier for people to understand what you're trying to tell them, is key.
Other questions? Thanks, guys. We so appreciate it. Now for the after conversation. Is there anything else you want to tell us?
He loves it. He loves it. It's been like 3 months.